Hey you guys, it's your girl AJ, the Glamour Witch, and we're here for some exclusive Patreon content. Today's video is going to be how to properly read your candle magic, or the candles that you use for spell workings. Now, I'm going to be breaking down the 3 different types of ways to read your candle magic, and I'm also going to share with you some of my specific spell work that I've done in the past to give you more of a better idea of what these things may look like when you do your own workings. This is a really great way to also see how your spell is going to manifest, if there's any blockages, if there's anything that you need to rework, if there's something that you're not seeing clearly. Being able to read your candle magic is the next level to being able to have a successful spell working and to improve your magical success rate. So this is technically considered a somewhat advanced stage of doing candle magic, but I think anyone at any stage of doing candle magic should begin to learn and document the ways that their candle spells kind of end and the finale, or even how those things are manifesting during the actual burning of the candle. So we're gonna jump right in, so just keep watching. All right, so let's talk about the 3 types of ways to read your candle working. So the first one is ceromancy, and that is reading the candle wax, specifically when you have a freestanding or a standalone candle that's not encased in glass or some other type of container. That is when you get to read the shapes of the wax, the way that it flows, the way that the candle reacts, all of that. You're basically just reading the wax. Pyromancy is reading the flame. So whether it is a tall flame, maybe it's small and punty, maybe it's flickering, it's dancing, it's sparking. That will give a lot of different information of maybe what's going on presently and the energies are in your space. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about capnomancy, which is reading the smoke that your candle gives off. Now, I don't mean like the soot that's going to be encased in a 7-day candle. I mean the smoke that will come and rise as the candle is burning. So that's really the way that you're going to be able to see it and identify it, unless you're doing a specific type of divination where you light the candle and then you blow it out and you watch the smoke kind of wherever it goes and all that stuff, because there is types of divination that do use that type of a practice, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're just pure and simply talking about how to read and identify what's going on with the candle work as it pertains to, you know, the beginning stages, the middle, and even the end of that spell, okay? So let's first talk about ceromancy. So ceromancy is, again, like I said, reading the wax, and this is a really great and honestly probably one of my favorite ways to read what's going on with my candle magic spell, right? If I'm doing a free standalone candle, so let's say I'm doing a spell working for self-love, or I'm doing a protection spell, maybe I'm doing something for money, maybe I'm using a candle that has, it's a figure candle, a shape. I am going to be checking the wax once everything has completely burned down, the flame is no longer going. I'm going to be watching it. Now I will watch it while it's burning and see what direction the wax is flowing, if there's any mountains or other little identifying factors. Sometimes the candle wax will make shapes and things of that nature that will be able to give even more clarity. And you yourself will find that over the course of practicing more and more candle magic, you'll be able to read and identify certain little details that are specific to you and your spirit guides, and that also just have overall meaning. You know, you might start seeing animal shapes or letters or other types of symbols that have meaning that will give greater depth and understanding to what it is exactly that's going to manifest from this spell. I also like ceromancy because it gives us an opportunity to understand the direction of the plate and how to set up your candle working, right? So typically when I'm doing a figure candle, I will make sure that the figure candle is facing me. So if I'm doing like a female figure candle to represent me, I identify as a woman, woman. So I'm going to have it set up so that the woman's front of her body is facing me. And when I'm doing my working, I'm addressing my oils and my herbs and I'm sprinkling it around the candle. That's all going to be set up and it's going to be in my direction, right? And this is very strategic because based on the areas of the plate or the tray, wherever I may have my candle, is going to tell me if things are working in my favor, if it's going in the right direction, or if it's going in some other aspects. And different directions and different placements on the plate will also help me to identify how and where and what aspects of my life this work will show up in. And it can also tell you, sometimes it can also tell you how long, how far off a candle working can be. It can tell you if, there's some blockages or hindrances, if this is supported by spirit, if there is something that is completely resistant to this work. It can show you a lot of different things, right? Especially if you're doing, let's say you're doing a communication spell, right? There are certain parts of the plate where you want to see the wax flowing in that direction, specifically places that have to do with the spirit realm, which also technically has to do with communication or this realm that is not necessarily physical, right? It's this etheric layer, right? So astral travel and dreams and intuitive wisdom, that kind of space is typically where communication comes in, especially if there's no contact between you and your target, right? You want to see maybe it flowing in that area of the plate, as well as some areas that are going to represent that it's going to manifest into the 3D reality, meaning that this person is going to open their mouth and speak to you, right? But there's also other ways of identifying when you're doing a working like that, if a person is going to be, able to speak. Now, if I was doing a communication spell, I would use either a skull candle or I would use actual lips. You can also do pillar candles or whatever the case may be, but I like that because they are more of a physical representation of talking, right? And when I usually see a skull candle and it's burning down and maybe the teeth part of the skull candle is still intact, it didn't melt down with the rest of the candle, then I'm like, okay, this person feels a certain way and it's going to impact them, but they may not physically speak it, right? So reading and identifying that in the wax working, it might not just show up in what's been burned, but also what's been left behind. Okay, so I'm back. I know it's a new day, new outfit, but my computer crashed and I lost some of the files from that recording. So we're just gonna re-record and redo it, okay? So I want to talk about the directions on the plate and the directions of the candles, the flowing of the wax. This is important because it helps us understand where this is going to manifest, how it's going to manifest, and even the timing in which it's going to manifest. So I have a diagram here that's basically going to show you the bottom, the top, the left, and the right side of the plate or the tray. You want to make sure that you can define this before you start to light the candle up. As you're dressing the candle, as you're putting together all the pieces and the components, you want to be able to make sure that you know what's the front, what's the back, what's the left and the right? And it's also important to make sure that your candle or whatever the working is primarily in the center. Now, let's say you do a candle working like this. This type of a candle working has other supporting candles around it that are in those places where, maybe there would be space, right? If you're doing one singular candle. I'm not necessarily talking about this type of dynamic, but even still, we know that the focus is the center candle. These candles on the outside are only meant to support the candle. So in the center of the plate represents the present moment as you are doing the working, as you are right now, right? And that's how you want to see it. And then the bottom half is going to be the part that is facing closest to you. The top is going to be the part facing furthest away from you. And then, of course, left and right, okay? So the bottom half of the plate or the tray represents speed, lust, energy, passion. It's a rushing of energy, meaning that your spell or whatever ritual you're doing can show up in your reality quite quickly, or there's a lot of energy behind it backing this. This can be a good sign if you are trying to get something kind of manifested or turned around pretty quickly. But I would also make sure that you're looking at the flow and the directions. Counterclockwise is removing, reversing, letting go of, clearing away, and clockwise is always going to be bringing things in, pulling things forward for yourself. So these are two very different understandings of what the plate is going to do, and obviously the wax is going to flow into all different directions. And so ultimately you're just going to want to periodically look to see where it's flowing and what direction, because it could change as the candle continues to release the wax or whatever the case may be. But just keep that in mind. These two directional sides will also kind of give you indication of if you're doing a working to banish negative energy, then you're going to want to see it go in a counterclockwise direction. But if you're doing something like a money working or to bringing success or victory or even like new love, you're going to want to see it flowing in the clockwise direction, meaning it's bringing things to you, new beginnings, and it's a positive supporting of that energy, right? So again, the bottom half, or the half that is facing you, is all about the speed. So when it comes to this side, you can almost guarantee that there will be a really intense energy pushing this intention forward, pushing this manifestation forward. It can also deal with passion, right? Creative energy. And this is not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it depends on what the working is in and of itself. And that's something that you're going to have to just use your discretion and your discernment to decide whether or not this is going to be beneficial for the work that you're doing, okay? The top half, or the part that is furthest away from you, is representing material realm, right? It can talk about money, property, anything that can happen in the material that you can touch and feel and engage with. But it can also represent political things, legal things as well. And this could be really beneficial if you're doing things like court case work, or you're trying to obtain more financial abundance. This is a really good place for it to show up. The left-hand side has to do with psychic, intuitive abilities, angels, dreams, pretty much anything in the spiritual realm. I would also go as far as to say it could also deal with technology, because it's also in that non-physical space. But I would, again, use your discretion, because there's going to be another aspect that I'm going to touch on that gives a little bit more color or directional energy to what could potentially happen in terms of timeline, right? The right side, or east, is going to represent new beginnings, fresh starts, new opportunity. It can also represent mental work or communication, and any outcome that is going to happen in the future. Now, again, I want to talk about the left and the right. So I love Madame Pamita's candle reading book. I think it's great information, but I've read a lot of different things about candle readings, and it's all pretty much the same, but also there's a lot of differences across spiritual practices. And I really only take what's necessary. And again, I always use discernment. If I'm not 100% sure, I pull out my divination. That means tarot cards, pendulum, whatever the case may be that you use in your practice, to kind of determine what it is that I'm seeing, and if what I'm feeling is actually accurate, or if it's something else that's coming forward. But one thing that I feel like is kind of agreed upon in the things that I've come across is that the right-hand side is talking about all the things that are going to be happening in the future, right? So future experiences, future outcomes, things that have not happened yet. This is actually positive for things that have to do with money, finance, whatever the case may be. If you see that it's largely on that side, then great. It means that it's flowing in that direction, it's going in that direction, and that you're going to see things happen in the future. Now, how far or close to the future, that's going to depend on whatever the situation is. And you're also going to want to look at the candle and any other shapes or just detailings that might give a clearer depiction of maybe a timeline, but also like if there's work that's necessary that you need to do in the mundane to support the manifestation, okay? So then the left side is going to deal with the past. And this has to do with things that have already happened, past relationships, past situations, past memories, something that has to do with something that already, a situation that already took place. Is it going to affect the way this is going to manifest, or is directly correlated with how this is going to manifest? Now, how does this show up, right? If I'm doing working for a new love, if I'm calling a new love, I'm not necessarily targeting a person. What the fuck is up with all this activity? Anyways, I'm not really targeting an actual person. I'm just telling the universe, I want new love to come in. This is the characteristics of the person that I want to manifest. This is how I want them to show up. This is the kind of relationship I want. And it flows in the direction of the past, or I see a lot of candle wax build up on the past side or on the left side. It's going to represent a couple of different things. And this is why your discernment is really important, because depending on what it is that's going on with you in your life, something about your past or past events is influencing whether or not this is going to manifest in the way that you would like it to, and how it's going to manifest. So an example of this is if it's flowing towards the past direction, somebody from my past that I've already met and I've already connected to is going to be highlighted in a potential match for what it is that I'm calling in. And that could be returning. There could be a past relationship, past connection that blossoms into this new love. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be everything that I've ever dreamt of. We know that when we do rituals and spells, it doesn't always go exactly the way that we intended, but sometimes it can be good. You know, we can start to recognize that there are people that we've actually maybe passed up or we've overlooked that were maybe at the time not in alignment with us, but now are absolutely somebody that we can share our life with and have this kind of dynamic. So that can be a great indication, right? To keep your mind open to even people from your past, right? I know a lot of people say like, I don't want new love, I don't want anything. But if you've never been with that person, or if this person who's coming back into your life is showing up differently, it technically is new love. And that's the real thing that you want to make sure that you're intentional about. If you're saying, I don't want it to be anyone that I've ever met, I don't want it to be anyone that I've ever come in contact with, I guess you could put that in the ritual, but I would give the universe a little wiggle room to kind of support you. This also could mean that there are past feelings, emotions, trauma that is hindering or blocking your ability to be able to manifest new love in your life. This could call for you to do personal and internal healing work that will support you to call this in. So let's move on to the right-hand side of the plate. So like I said before, the right-hand side is about the future, right? It's all about these future outcomes. But the future in terms too of the upper right-hand corner, which is going to be future feelings, and the lower right-hand corner, which is going to be future events. This is also something that you want to keep in mind when it's flowing. There might be a certain situation, or there might be a certain feeling or an emotion that is going to be triggered, or an idea or a passion, whatever the case may be, that is going to help this thing manifest. This is also really great for identifying either snags, blockages, or the potential for you to kind of support the work on a mundane level. You should always be supporting your work on a mundane level anyways, but this can be a really great way to kind of see how and maybe what way it's going to come up. So if you're doing a ritual or a spell for somebody, for a project that you're putting on, right? And it starts to flow down into the, the right-hand corner, right? The bottom right-hand corner, then you can almost guarantee that this work is going to positively impact an event that's happening in the future, which is what you're doing this working for, an event that's going to be happening in the future. Success, victory, whatever the case may be. If you also see activity happening in the bottom half or the south section of the plate, then you know that this can come really quickly, especially if it's coming, like the event is coming up in the future very close. You know that this is going to be impacting it very quickly, and there's a lot of power and energy behind this working. This is a really positive sign. Also, if it's flowing, if the wax is flowing mostly in a clockwise direction, also very positive for things coming in and being pulled in, right? New beginnings, new communications, new opportunities. This is what you want to see. It's very, very positive, right? And also, even if it's flowing into the direction of future feelings, something about this work is going to impact you emotionally, and that can also be really beneficial. You might be really happy or excited or a feeling of success and victory in what you've done, even if there's snags or hiccups or whatever the case may be, but you're going to feel good, feel successful about this energy. And that can almost be just as important as the success of the event in somebody else's mind, whatever success means, right? Is how you feel about what it is that you've accomplished and what you created. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a couple of different types of candles. I am going to give some pictures and some documentation of the wax, but I want to show you the wax and reading the wax on a 7-day candle. Now I have a couple of old candles that I've collected and I didn't throw away because I knew I was going to be doing this this video so that I can kind of show you what it is that I'm talking about. Okay, so let's talk about this candle here. This candle is, as you can see, there is black soot here at the top. And let's see if the camera will focus a little bit. And then there is a ring around the bottom with the wax still there. But as you can see here, there is no wax in this area. Now, whenever there's wax at the bottom, it just means that this working will eventually have to be done again. There is still something left behind. There is still work to be done, or there may be work that I personally need to do to help get this going, right? And the fact that there is a clear bottom where I can see through it means that this did work and it did manifest, but it just means that there are some things on my end that I have to do. And this was a money spell, so it made sense. I was doing it as it pertains to my business. So of course there's gonna be things I have to do. Now, like, I wanna also talk about this aspect here. As you can see, the black soot starts to fade right in the middle aspect of the candle. This is an indication that there was blockages or resistance to the magic or the work, and that was cleared over time. This is something that you want to see. This is actually a good indication. It means that anything that was stopping the work from manifesting got cleared away by that working. Now, if it goes down lower than that, then it's an indication that either you want to do this work again, or that you need to cleanse and clear your space, do maybe a protection working, and then come back and do this ritual when all that is said and done so that there is no blockages. You might want to do a road opener working, or just take a spiritual bath, or cleanse your space and your environment. You should always be doing that anyways when you do any type of candle working. But this is actually a positive sign, okay? And just going into that, this is an indication of what I was talking about. Now, the black soot has come down past the halfway mark, and we're down here. Now, it does clear out up down here, but and also we see that there is like a small ring of wax here at the bottom, and very little wax here on this part. But I would say that this is something that, it doesn't mean that this was unsuccessful. It did manifest, but there was a lot of resistance, and I didn't get as much out of this as I possibly could. Now, I burned this all the way down, one, for the fact of this working in this ritual, or for this video, but I also wanted to see if it was going to clear out. Now, when it got to this halfway mark, it didn't have the soot here, so I didn't know that it was going to be this way, but I just felt like once it was down here, might as well, I'm not gonna stop the candle right here with all this wax. So I just let it burn itself out to see how it was going to look. Now, this is completely black in the inside with no like, white or any openings or spaces. So this is like full resistance, which means I need to cleanse and clear and do some type of work before I do this working again, okay? Also, I think this was a money spell as well. Now, this one is, in my personal book, considered a success. There's not a whole lot of blockages here, but I would say this is not necessarily the best example, because there is a little bit of white, I'm not gonna say white soot, but white film over this. So there's a difference between white soot, because when you put your finger on it, you can actually rub it away. Now, you can rub it away. Actually, now that I'm seeing it, you can actually rub this away. And there is white soot here, but then there's also wax kind of down here at the bottom of the candle. So to me, this kind of means that there is still some aspects of this. When there's a white film, there's some aspects that I'm not actually able to see right now, and that is going to maybe play a factor in if I'm going to have to do this work again. This was a crossing or a uncrossing work and a protection work just to cleanse and break me free of any negative energy. And I would say it worked swimmingly. My angels, ancestors, and guides supported this work completely, and there's really only the herbs burnt at the bottom that are left behind in this candle. This is a successful working, and it's kind of what you want to see. Now there are some little smudge mark here. It could just mean that it caught some negative energy in the working, also really positive. And I would say this is a success, right? Now if you start to get rings in your actual candle, like left behind rings from the wax, this can indicate time, the time that it will take, and you can count each ring, the ring that needs to go all the way around. If it's broken, then you won't count that ring, right? So it could indicate how many months, how many weeks. It can even indicate how many days that this could manifest, or you could see some effects of this working. So let's talk about this candle. This one has the white film that I was telling you about, but it also has black soot here right at the top. Now, it did create resistance, and it does mean that this working, there is something about this that I have not seen. Now, if you come down here at the bottom, you can't really see because there's a yellow background here, but you can see that there's still some of the wax buildup all the way down. It's kind of created this this shadowy film where you can't really see through the candle. This is something, in my personal book, there's also like bubbles in here and other things in here. And there's actually some salt that I think I put in here too. I use this as a salt container. Anyways, repurposing the candles. There's some leftover wax at the bottom. I think this was working that had to do with success. But there's something about this that I haven't seen. So this will require me to do some divination. This might require for me to do some shadow work. There may be other aspects of my spiritual journey that I'm not really paying attention to that this is actually impacting. Depending on the color or whatever it is, it could represent a specific chakra that needs support, that needs help in the manifestation of this thing. And because there is black soot right at the top, it tells me that this whole situation has support there. Like the universe is saying, like, we do want this to manifest for you, and this will manifest, but it's not going to manifest in the time that you think it will, and it's not going to show up in the way that you want it to, because right now you're not seeing it clearly. Okay, so still not a bad one, but not great. And then this last one is what I would say is pretty much unsuccessful. This is a protection candle, okay? And as you can see, half of this candle is still here on this. And I actually put it out halfway down because it just wasn't doing the job, right? And I just realized that this was unsuccessful, and I decided to just cut my losses with it, especially when it's a protection working. It pretty much indicates that this is not doing it. Either it could mean that the actual candle itself is a faulty candle from the manufacturer, or it could just mean that there's not enough energy. But when I see this on the side here, there is quite literally a block stopping this from manifesting and working the way that you have intended it to work. So that is when I went and did this working. And this was the cut and clear cleansing candle, which was fully supported by my guides. And actually that was what it was that needed to be done originally, instead of the protection working, because whatever was lingering in the space was making me think I needed this, but actually what it was this, right? So that could also be an indication. And then too, there is shapes here. You can see the shapes, and it's actually really interesting because there's red in this area, which is why it made me feel like, okay, I need to do some cleansing on my specific energy as opposed to just assuming that there's something or someone. There very well could have been someone messing with my energy, but I needed to cut and clear that off of me before I did another working. Now I did do another protection candle, but it was after that and after I had cleansed, and that one burned all the way down, and I didn't save it because I was like, we already have something as a representation of that. But again, this is what I would call unsuccessful, and also probably not even worth continuing to light this. Toss this out, and just start over again, okay? So that's this. Now if your candle breaks, and that's happened to me many times, all of a sudden the candle will crack. Maybe it won't break, but it'll crack. This can mean that the candle is taking a blow for you in the spirit realm. Whatever is happening spiritually is being manifested here. So if you're doing a working for something that's meant to cut and clear and release, you're doing a separation spell or a banishing spell or a, whatever cleansing spell, a crack can actually be a good thing. It means whatever it is that, is that you're trying to do has actually been separated. Like if you're doing a separation work, a crack is great. It means that there is separation happening there. And it can also mean that the candle is taking the blow so that you don't. Now, if it completely shatters, like the whole thing breaks, it means there is something stopping the working. And typically it typically doesn't mean good things, right? It could mean that the person that you're doing the working on has some really bad things coming to them, right? If you're doing a cut and clear and their candle or whatever explodes and the whole thing explodes, it typically doesn't ever really mean something good unless it's to free or release yourself from something, or you're doing a banishing, or you're doing some type of a separation work. Usually if it breaks, it's not a great thing. I'm actually going to put on the screen here one of the worst candle rituals that I'd have ever seen in terms of it just going horribly awry. And this candle exploded, but exploded right at the bottom, right? All of it was burned black soot and then exploded in one little pocket, right? Bursted open, the wax came out with the wick, and it was burning the table that it was on, and the smoke detector went off. So it was a really big, dramatic show. And shortly after that, this wasn't my candle, I didn't do it, but it was somebody that I was staying with at the time who was also learning candle magic. And I contacted this person and I just said, I don't know what this candle spell was, but you need to do a cleansing ritual. You need to do some protection work. Because not only did this not work, but it backfired big. And it's going to be a dramatic backfiring. Something is going to happen to you that you were not expecting. And the fact that it broke open in this perfect little hole, it was almost like an escape, right? And this escape plan, some type of a thing got let loose. And what's interesting is that person, some behavior that they had kind of kept hidden actually was exposed, and that came forward, and it created disaster for them. And ultimately, something misfortunate happened to them, right? They didn't die or anything like that, but just something that they didn't want to happen happened to them. And it was kind of an embarrassing and dramatic and very quick and sudden tower moment for them. So these things are things you want to keep in mind, and they do play a factor in a role. They may not manifest right away, but when they do, if it's talking about breaking, you pretty much can guarantee that something is going on, and you need to make sure that you're on the up and up with the other parts of your working. There's a light here that just keeps going on and off. It's like, I don't know what's going on, you guys. So these are the candle workings, and this is just a small portion of what the candles can look like. You can see there could be wax, or there could be herbs that get stuck on the side. If you put glitter or other types of things that get stuck on the side that could create patterns and shapes and all these other things. You could see actual shapes in the soot on the glass, and those are things that are worth reading as well, and very, very important symbols and synchronicities in indicating how things will manifest and what's going on with the working. Okay, so again, I would like to talk about a little bit of the wax indication. Now, I just spoke to you about the encased glass workings, right? When we're using a pillar candle, or whatever the case may be, it's going to be much different than using a 7-day candle that's encased in glass. Now it has all these other different elements. So let's talk about the wax and what it means, and some other signs that you want to look out for that will either support what you're doing, or maybe let you know that you need to do the working again, or stop the working, or that it did not manifest the way that you want to. Now, when you burn a candle, standalone candle, that means there's no glass or anything that's holding it up. When you see that there is no wax, like it just burns straight down, and that's happened to me many times, and I'm sure it's happened to you at least once. When it burns down completely with no wax left behind, maybe there is a wick and maybe there's a little bit of residue at the very bottom. This is a sign that there was no blockages to your intention, no resistance, and you can almost guarantee. Why the fuck are there so many fucking animals out here all of a sudden? You could almost guarantee, sorry you guys, there's like birds that are like flying everywhere. It's a lot of activity back here. You can almost guarantee that the spell is not only going to manifest exactly how you intended it, but that there won't be any resistance, and that you can see it coming forward pretty quickly, right? There is excess wax, and there's almost always excess wax when you're doing a standalone candle, right? Flows to the left, to the right, whatever the case may be. That's not like a problem. It just can mean that there's a little bit more extra work that's going on, but I actually see it as a positive, because it means that I have more of an opportunity to read how this is going to manifest, right? It doesn't mean that there's like excess wax, that means it's a bad working, or it's not going to manifest, or it's fucked, or it's not successful, or whatever the case may be. It just means that, there's something else that is going on with this situation that is necessary, or that your guides might want you to know. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you're lighting a candle, whether that be a figure candle or a pillar candle or chime, whatever the case may be, and you start to see the teardrops on the candle that drip down, teardrops are an indication that there is an emotional energy that is going to take place as a result of this working. So if you're doing a working for clearing negative energy, or you're doing a protection working, or you're doing a baneful working, something about this work is going to bring up a lot of heavy emotional energy that could almost bring somebody to tears. Tears are not a problem, they're not an issue, it's not bad. It just could mean release is necessary, right? And the best way sometimes to release negative energy is by crying. If you're doing a baneful working, though, this could mean that whatever the negative energy is, or whatever it is that you're sending at that person, will result them to have an emotional reaction to that work. Now, that could be positive or negative based off of what it is that you're doing. Clearly, if you're doing a baneful working, it's going to be positive for you, but not so much for your target. If there are pillars still standing up, so I'm talking about if you're burning the candle down and you see it almost kind of like tunneling, but not tunneling, but basically just that there are certain parts of the candle that are completely unaffected by the wax. There might be a tall flame, it might be really hot, and everything else is melting away, but there's just like these sections where the candle is still sticking up and you still have these pieces of wax, and it should have burnt out, but for whatever reason it goes all the way down to the bottom and these pillars are standing. This is an indication that there is a very specific blockage to this intention. Now, this is where you're going to also want to look at what direction these pillars are standing in. This is going to give you an indication of what that blockage might be. But I would also go as far as pulling cards or doing divination to see more clearly what it is that blockage is, and then maybe doing a working specifically to clear that blockage and then do the work again, right? Especially if you know that going into it, that was something that you knew was going to maybe be a snag, but you were hoping that the working would clear that up, and there's that blockage. You're going to want to approach it or attack it directly and then rework the working. And you might find too that clearing that blockage actually just brings it in naturally, and you don't actually have to do another working. If you see bubbles in your working, and I mean like bubbles that stay, right? Sometimes it's just science, right? We got to remember, like, some of the times the manufacturer, the wax, the wick, all that stuff, there's a lot of different things that are not magical that happens with candles, but on a spiritual level and on a spiritual terminology, bubbles mean that things are rising to the surface to be addressed. Things will be revealed. Information that was once hidden is coming now to the surface. And even if it's very tiny bubbles, but if it's a massive bubble, then it's a big thing that is coming up to the surface. So if I'm doing a truth reveal spell or truth serum spell, then I'm gonna want to see things like that. It's gonna be positive, right? Or if I'm trying to do a working that is concealing something, that's not necessarily something that I want to see, right? I don't want it to, something to be coming up to the surface to be revealed. But these are great indications for also too, like if you're trying to get a job opportunity or if you're trying to call in more money, there might be some information as a result of this work that will come to the surface that will help support you in obtaining what it is that you desire. So looking for those little bubbles. And I would say not just like while the candle is actually burning and all that, but on the back end, once everything is cooled off and it's solidified, if you see bubbles that have stayed intact, that is a good indication that this work is going to be revealing something that's hidden. A scorpion tail bending backwards that pretty much just stays in that position, not going into a roll or turning into something else, but completely turns to the side, represents betrayal, a breach of trust, and basically backstabbing, right? It can also represent gossip and again, hidden issues, hidden things, right? This is not a good sign if you are doing a truth reveal spell. This is not a good sign if you're doing a bring me my partner closer spell. This is not a good sign for pretty much anything, right? But you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to what it is exactly that you're doing. If you're doing a baneful magic spell and you see a scorpion's tail and a part of the ritual was to have them experience betrayal and heartbreak and a breach of trust for the people around them, it could be a positive sign. But if that's not something that is part of the working that you're doing, then of course it's not something that you want to show up. But when you see these things, I'm very proactive. I push energy into it throughout the entire time, which is why I say watch it from the beginning, in the middle, and the end of the working. Watch your candle, because if you see a scorpion and instead of just letting it be, I will usually take a little bit of uncrossing oil or reversal oil or banishing oil. I will douse that little area with the oil, put some oil on that area, and then I'll take a lighter and I will burn that shit. And I will just continue to set intention and pray and just say, I release all betrayal, I reverse all, negative energy, I send back this whatever the case may be, I uncross this, I clear this away, right? I'm very proactive with that. But again, this is if you know for a fact that this is a scorpion and it's staying in that position for longer than a couple of minutes. If you leave and come back and it falls off, then whatever this was broken off of you and it's totally fine. And this is why I say kind of give it a little bit of time, use your discretion. But if it's been there for a little bit too long, bust out that uncrossing oil, douse that little side, and light that baby up with your intention and prayers and affirmations. And that's going to be the best way to remove and clear that specific energy from the working. There is a split in the candle, and when I talk about a split, I mean a sliver down the side of the candle. I don't mean the candle turning off into two sides, but just a little sliver on the side that seems to just keep going in that direction. I'll have a picture here. This picture is actually from Hoodoo Delish, and this is a indication that there is a choice that needs to be made between two different opposing sides, right? And this can be, again, up to your discretion if it's beneficial or not beneficial. But it typically, in my opinion, it's like if I have to choose between two things and I'm doing this working to bring this thing in, if I have to then, there's like another element of it, it can be a bit of a pain in the ass, because it's like, well, I thought I knew what I wanted, but you might be, shown another opportunity or another thing that will force you to kind of decide whether or not this is really what you want. This can be also a difficult thing if you're doing love workings, if you're doing reconciliation work. If you're doing bring them back, come to me, whatever the case may be, you might find that you have to decide between having this new person or connecting with this new person, and then all of a sudden, you know, their past person appears, right? And it's like, well, that's what I originally wanted, but then here's this new thing, this new opportunity that's also really amazing, right? Or if you're doing working on somebody else for them to make a decision and you see that they're there and that's where it's kind of staying for the whole of the working, it means that they're having trouble deciding between what it is that they want and what it is that you're trying to get them to feel or to do, right? So now I'm going to show you a couple of other types of wax readings that are indications of different types of things. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures as well as what these things mean. So let's jump in.
Come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Oh, come and cast a spell with me. Yeah. Come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Oh, take you on a roller coaster ride. Do you wanna roll with me? Pull out the candles, pull out the crystals, pull out the recipe. Kicking up the magic tonight. Wanna let go and I wanna take flight. And the moon is out big and bright. Going sky clad in this motherfucker. Going sky clad in this motherfucker. Say a prayer to the sky. Make sure your intention's right. Hold it close, hold it tight. Then release it in the fire. Come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Oh, come and cast a spell with me. Yeah, come and cast a spell with me. Come and cast a spell with me. Oh, this ain't a fantasy. This is the real life. This is reality. Stepping in 5D. Ancestors comfortably seated. That power's exactly what you needed. Ha, and all you had to do is receive it. Yeah, yeah.
I want you to also to consider things like the herbs, the oils, any type of crystals, gemstones that you put in with the workings. This can actually affect the burn. And this is not a magical thing. This is a mundane thing, right? This is a just literal science thing. If you fill your candle to the brim, whether it be a glass or even on a standalone candle with tons of herbs, it's going to impact the way that it burns. Clearly, obviously, that's just science. So be careful about how many herbs that you're putting on. You also want to be fire safe. A tip that I always recommend for anybody who's just starting Candle Magic is to have a little shaker jar, either like a salt container or something like that, or just an entire container that you can pour out that has baking soda inside of it. This will put out almost any Candle Magic working. All you gotta do is put it over it and you don't have to worry about splatter. Never, ever, ever put water on a open flame or on a candle working that has been going crazy and that you want to, never do that, right? If you're really worried about your candle going off like that, I would put it in a heat safe container, whether that be a cast iron pot or maybe you have one of those like cooking sheets or whatever that's meant to go into hot temperatures, right? And then put it in your bathtub or only if you have like a hard stone, right? If you can't take it outside because of whatever the case may be, it's too windy, it'll kick up all this stuff, then put it in your bathroom and then take your baking soda and pour it over the entirety of the candle. It will put it out and extinguish it immediately. It has to be baking soda though. It can't be baking powder, it can't be salt. It has to be baking soda, and this will eliminate the fire and you can go about your merry way. Now, if it gets to that point where the flame is so ridiculously crazy, and again, we'll get into that on the flame side, then you also want to consider what that means in terms of the working before you go in and, whatever the case may be, because pretty much once you put the baking soda on, the candle is ruined and you're not going to be able to relight it, and it's not gonna, like, you could pretty much throw the whole thing away. And I would say start over again. Treat it as though that didn't work and do it again. And this time maybe use less herbs, less oil, less whatever the case may be. And this is just something you're going to learn over time, right? And make sure that wherever you're lighting your candle is a ventilated space. Open a window. If you're worried about the wind or whatever the case may be, just make sure that you're keeping an eye on it, right? Don't leave it unattended if it is a standalone candle. And even if it's not a standalone candle, and let's say it's a glass candle, which is a little bit more safe than just having like, you know, whatever, because those candles can fall over and then light the whole motherfucking place on fire. Don't put it next to curtains. I think that that's obvious. Don't put your candles on top of a cloth situation. I know people like to have altar cloths and stuff like that, but I would just avoid it unless you have a big enough tray that if it fell over left or right, it wouldn't fall over onto the cloth. Then you don't have to worry about that maybe as much. But I would just, even still, if it's a standalone candle, don't leave it unattended. Watch that bad boy all the way through. You can maybe step away from it for a second. You don't have to sit there and stare at it for hours, depending on how long it burns, but you want to be coming back in and out of that space. If you're got to do other work, whatever the case may be, set that candle up wherever you're going to be working. Make sure that it's within eye shot, you know, where you can look up if you see smoke or you hear popping and hissing and any of that other stuff, which we're going to get into what that means. If you see any of that or hear any of that, you want to be in the same room at least. So grab you a drink and something to eat and put your favorite TV show, put Charmed on, put The Magicians on, and just let it be, or go into meditation or do whatever it is that you're needing to do. But just make sure you're in the same room if possible, okay? Also make sure that your smoke detector is working. So let's talk about tunneling. Tunneling is something that will not only happen for a glass container, but also for pillar candles and free standalone candles as well. Tunneling is an indication that there is unfinished business and that there is something very clearly that is not getting addressed with this working. So it could mean something as simple as, you know, if you're doing a money working, which many people light endless green candles for money, and it's tunneling in the center, it can mean that there is mundane work, or there is quite literally a block all the way around. There is something fundamentally that is stopping this. And that could be something as simple as you ain't fucking applying for jobs, you're not telling people about your business, you're not putting the work in, you're not seeking these types of things, so it's not going to manifest, right? Your reality, you're thinking about what it is that you need to do to get it, or you're setting this intention, but then you have no action plan on how to achieve these things. It's really important to always apply mundane steps with any type of manifestation or magical working. If you're doing a protection working and there is tunneling in this candle, you can almost guarantee that there is something really big that is impacting your ability to do protection work on yourself that needs to be cleared away. So you might want to switch the entire working, instead of doing a protection working, a cleanse, a cut and clear, a road opener before you do this work. I think it's always a good idea to do a just standard basic road opener or blockbuster every once in a while in between your workings, because it just clears and removes anything that's stopping or stagnating the work. But if you haven't been keeping up with that and you're not doing that very often, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that whenever you see that tunneling, that you go right into divination, meditation, speak to your spirit guides, your ancestors, your angels, to see what it is that you're not seeing, right? And a lot of times, you know, it's frustrating to see the tunneling, but it can quite literally mean like, okay, you're doing this working and this is not what you need to be focusing on at all. There is something way more important that needs your attention, and you're trying to act like you know what the hell is going on, and you really don't, right? And that's just on period, okay? And that's on your spirit guides, okay? I know there's somebody out there like, damn, she's talking to me. Called you out. I want to also talk about cracks in the glass. I think I talked about this in the other video, but I'm gonna say it again. If it cracks but it doesn't break, not as big of a deal as it completely shattering and exploding. Now, depending on the working, it can be a positive thing. But in my experience, if a candle completely breaks, it's pretty much guaranteed that whatever that was backfired. An explosion is not a good thing, especially if the explosion happens at the top half of the candle and not the bottom, right? It means before the candle even finished doing what it's doing, it exploded. Pretty much a sign put this down, put this away, or that it backfired on you. Now, if it just cracks, it could mean that whatever it was that was hindering this intention got broken off. Now, depending on the kind of work that it is, this can be really positive. You're doing a cut and clear or release or remover of negative energy, then a crack in the glass can mean that it literally broke and separated you from whatever it is. It cut that tie. This is really positive. It means the work was so powerful that it manifested in the glass breaking, right? But it didn't shatter and separate and all that other stuff. This also can potentially be about the heat of the wax. But if it's not unreasonably hotter than it normally is and it cracks like that, then you can almost guarantee that it's a spiritual indication. If it shatters, breaks completely, it can mean destruction, chaos. It can mean hexes, curses, jinxes, any baneful magical attack. Just basically, or it can mean that the spell backfired and that there will be a lot of different negative repercussions as a result of this working. And if that happens to you, I immediately implore you to put that candle out, throw it away. Immediately clean that shit up, cleanse your entire space, your entire house, top to fucking bottom. Do a spiritual bath, do a banishing, and do a protection working immediately. Especially if you're doing something on a target that you did not check beforehand to see if they had spiritual protections or if they had already been doing a return to sender. That shit just came right back at you, and it came back quick. And if you're doing something that you know is kind of a little fucked up or petty, then you can almost guarantee that you might not be able to, even all of that might not protect you, right? You might just have to learn your lesson. And sometimes our spirit team there's never any planes when I'm out here during the day, and then all of a sudden when I record shit, it's loud as fuck. Or maybe I never really pay attention to it till I need it to be fucking quiet. I don't know. Anyways, you can almost guarantee that your spirit guides are going to allow things to happen to you so you can learn the lesson. So if you are just starting out and you're throwing around hexes and curses and all that other stuff, and you don't know what you're doing, and you think your little one pillar black candle is going to protect you from a nasty, gnarly ass ritual that you just threw at somebody else, I'm sorry, baby, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough. It's going to be about wards. It's going to be about cleansing and clearing. And you need to make sure that you're checking to see what people's natural level of protection is, so that you're not hitting their wards and then getting yourself fucked up. Now, there is a way around this if you want to put in the working that if they do decide to do a return to sender, that it comes back to you almost like a pet, or almost like something, or something that is not going to be harmful to you when it returns to you. You can imbue that in the working as well, and I find that actually helps lessen the blow. But if that person sent it back but with an extra little kick on the back end, then all bets are lost. All bets are lost. So just keep that in mind and keep your nose clean. Be safe with it. Let's talk about pyromancy, okay? So a small flame or a small punty flame is a clear indication that the working does not have enough energy backing and supporting it. This could require you to do more prayers, more incantations, more affirmations, more energy work. Maybe you need to cleanse and clear your space. Maybe you need to turn the candle off, come back to it when you're in a different headspace. But there's not enough energy being pushed into this. A lot of people just assume that you can just sprinkle some herbs and some magical oils over it and then call it a motherfucking day, and never set intention, never pray, never push energy, never raise energy within your body and then send it into the candle to get the magic working. And then they see these small punty flames and they don't think to themselves oh, well, probably need to put more energy into it. They just think oh, well, it's probably just needs to kick off. Now, I'll let you know, in my experience, I've had candles burn and they started off small and punty, and I pushed more energy into it and it still was small and punty, but when I left and came back to the candle, the flame raised, right? Or maybe it's my room and I fell asleep. I put a little extra energy into it before I went to sleep, and I decided that I didn't want to turn it off, and I wake up in the middle of the night and the flame is hot and high and burning. it can change throughout the working. So just kind of keep that in mind. But it does mean that you need to be pushing in more energy. There wasn't enough energy at the top. Now let's say you did do a bunch of energy work and you did put your energy into it and you spend a lot of time with the candle and it's still that. It can be that the wick is just faulty and it's not working. So just keep that in mind. But typically, and almost usually every time, it's an indication that there's not enough energy to get this work started and support this intention. So a strong, bright, and steady flame means tons of energy, success, really powerful vibration is in this working. Alternatively, though, it can also mean that energy or emotions are running high. So depending on what it is and depending on how big the flame is, if a bigger flame doesn't always mean positive work. It can mean a little bit too much energy, a little bit too much passion. And you're going to want to make sure, again, like I keep saying over and over again, that you use discernment to decide whether or not this is going to be beneficial for the work that you're doing. If it seems a little too high for no reason, then you might want to, again, you still might want to cut the flame off, snuff it out, and then take a beat with it, reevaluate the energy, make sure that you do some divination to make sure that this isn't gonna be too much, whatever the case may be. Maybe you want to add a little bit of lavender in that bitch to calm things down or whatever, soothe things, and then light it back up again and see if that changes the consistency of the flame. It may or may not, but sometimes too big of a flame is not necessarily a good thing. If it burns very quickly, typically 7-day candles don't actually burn in 7 days, but if it burns like in a day or in a day and a half, the whole candle burns out. Whatever you're intending is probably going to come to you pretty quickly, and it could be almost too fast, right? So if it's something that you need to see some turnaround on in this near future, that could be beneficial for you. But if it's something that shouldn't be, like let's say you're doing a love working, right? A quick burn can be a negative reading, right? Because it could mean that as fast as it started, as quick as it started and the flame took off, it's as fast as it's going to go out, right? And so you don't necessarily want it to be like a short, quick burn. You want it to be steady, but you don't want it to be faster than, a reasonable amount of time. And you're gonna know what I'm talking about if it happens. If it burns slow, it could be that whatever the intention is going to take longer than usual to manifest in your reality. So you want to know what that is reasonably, right? Too fast and too slow might not be an indication if it's the type of candle that you're using, right? If you're using a chime candle, too fast, it's not going to be too fast. I mean, they usually don't burn for that long. So you just want to know what the burn time is for that candle. Some companies will put that on there, and then sometimes you'll just have to kind of figure it out on your own. And they may say oh, this will burn up to 48 hours, or this will burn up to this amount of time, whatever. Don't let the 7-day candle title convince you that it's supposed to burn for 7 days. But typically people will turn it on and off as it goes on. I'm one of those people that I will not turn my candles off. Once it started lighting for spiritual magical purposes, that bitch is staying clear, because I always imagine it as I'm starting the energy. And if I'm not pushing the same amount of energy in that I did at the top when I first lit it, then it's just gonna delay and stagnate, and also be muddy the intention, right? It needs to be consistent. So once I set it, that's it, baby. We going all the way to the end, to the finish line. And anything that happens, I want to see it right away. I don't want to be questioning, well, is it because I turned it off halfway, or is it because this is an indication of something spiritual or magical happening? If the flame goes out, it's this ain't it, sis. It's not what we need to be focusing on. We need to redirect. We need to move around. We need to go do something else. That's exactly what that means. If it goes out and you can't stay lit, it's a clear sign that your guides are telling you that this is not the working that you need to be doing right now, and that you need to redirect your focus someplace else. If the flame is drowned out by the wick, again, another indication that there is not enough energy to power this working and this ritual. So again, you will typically have to start over again. Some people will dig out the wick if it's not too late, if it hasn't already dried up. But if it's already dried up and it's like in there, just start over again. Just start all over again. Don't try to burn it. Don't try to take a torch to it and try to find the wick. Just let it go, right? Because it could be the wick, or it could just be that, again, you didn't put enough energy into it and the working wouldn't have been successful in the way that you wanted it to be anyway. So there's no use in continuing it. It's probably better for you to do it again with a little bit more oomph. If you see these little bulbs that appear as so it's like these little nodules that will appear on the candle wick. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it's not. But basically it means that there's some type of a knot or some type of it's an indication of a blockage, but something that needs to be untied, right? And the wick is just as much a part of the intention and just as much a part of the reading as anything else. So I want to keep that in mind. But if you see that all the way down, it's just kind of peeling off and there's like these two knots here, there can be some type of a blockage in your intention. So it could be in the wording, it could be in a lot of different things, but something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that the candle magic will not be successful, but you might want to, let's say, blow it out, address whatever the blockage may be by doing divination, tarot, whatever the case may be, and then come back, do it again, remove the nodules and start it fresh and see if that changes anything, right? But it's not as big of a deal in my personal opinion. Like, it's not enough for me to say throw the candle away, but it is enough to be like, okay, well, there's clearly something else going on here and I need to keep that in mind, that there might be a little bit of a block. Bust out that blockbuster oil, that road opener oil, and address yourself with it every day. Take a road opening bath if you need to do that, and to get clear about what it is. It usually means that you yourself are unclear about the intention. Your intent itself is like shaky. Like you want it, but you're not really sure how you're going to get it, or you're not really confident that you will get it. And this is what's causing a little bit of a blockage, right? It's typically a you thing and less of like an outside influence. So that's something to keep in mind. Less problematic, but also still an issue. So let's talk about hissing, cracking, crackling, popping from the candle wick. So if every once in a while your candle may make a sound, right? And again, there are scientific reasons for why this is happening, but we're not talking about that right now. If you hear it and it's kind of like a soft hissing and popping, whatever the case may be, and it's not so frequent, then this can just be like gentle messages. This could be positive exchange, positive conversations, especially if this is about like you and another person, that you could be having positive exchange back and forth, right? But it does depend on the frequency and the intensity of the pop, right? Because sometimes, again, it can be just like the oils or whatever the case may be, kind of having a combustion moment, and other times it's actual communication being indicated. This also could talk about, like, if it's soft and frequent, it can also talk about secret messages, things that are whispered, things that you don't really want to get out, but you're saying it anyways. So this is also a good way. It needs to be kind of quiet, and it also needs to be infrequent. So if it's popping, and it's going off, and it's hissing, it's going crazy, that's not what this is, right? If it's mild, but it's frequent, it means that your target, or whatever this thing is, it's got a lot to say, right? Or there's going to be a lot of talk around this, right? There's information that's needing to be said. And it could be an important message, so you want to keep that in mind. But a mild would be like, a few pops every couple of minutes, or, it's not as crazy. It's not a loud pop. It's not crazy. Now, if it's loud and it's frequent, it means disagreements, it means fighting, it means arguments, it means gossip, backbiting, and it can also mean warnings from your spiritual team telling you either that this working is bringing something forward, or that you need to listen and be paying attention to whatever messages or any thoughts that are coming forward. They're trying to get your attention through the working, especially if you're lighting a candle for your ancestors, for your spiritual team. just like as an offering, and that candle is the candle that's popping and hissing and crackling, it's almost guaranteed that they're trying to talk to you. And it may not be negative. It could just be like, I'm trying to get your attention because you're not paying attention. You need to go into meditation, or you need to bust out your cards. You maybe need to do some automatic writing. Whatever way that you specifically tap in with your spiritual team, that's going to be the time to do it, right? And it's really important. But if it's not a candle for that, sometimes spirit will just do it anyways. If it's not a candle for that, then usually it means like a lot of chatter, a lot of gossip, arguing, fighting, and it can be negative or positive depending on the kind of working that you're doing. Flickering or dancing of the flame usually indicates that there are spiritual activities. Your guides are supporting you. There could be a spiritual energy or entity in your space that's making it dance and move. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that there might be some spiritual support being put there. So if you work with angels, or if you work with your ancestors, or even passed on loved ones, dancing and flickering could be an indication that they're trying to help you and support the work that you're doing, which is actually really amazing and beautiful and can be really beneficial for you. If it's intense and erratic, like it's going crazy and it's like making it like all these weird lighting shifts in your room, it can pretty much mean that whatever it is that you're manifesting could come about, but it can come about in a chaotic or hectic way, right? The journey for that is going to be a little all over the place. Let's talk about double flames, triple flames, and I'm going to show a clip here of indication of multiple flames, right? So this happens for a lot of different reasons. If you have two candles burning, obviously there's going to be two flames. If there's herbs, a lot of different things can bring about these things. But when you see two flames, it can literally talk about, I mean, there's so many different things. It can mean spiritual support from your guides. They're supporting this work. They're supporting you in obtaining this. It can mean that there's somebody else trying to interfere or infiltrate the work to stop or hinder this. It could also be a representation of twin flames. It could be a representation of separation as well, depending on what the work is for and how far away the candles are. Now, if the flames separate and they kind of move away as opposed to coming closer together, that's going to indicate separation. But if it's coming together, it can be a really great sign of reconciliation. So again, also beneficial for the working, whatever type of working that you're doing. And it could be great for things like money. It doesn't have to be necessarily a reconciliation spell. I'm like looking over here because there's like all these bugs like flying. Y'all, there's so much activity out here. It can be like an indication that something is coming back into your possession. It's being drawn and attracted to you. So if you're doing attraction work or come to me work, that could be a really great indication. So you just want to watch the flame and see if it separates or if it comes together. And then typically if it comes together, they'll go out beside each other, or they'll go out at the same time. Very good indication that, you know, whatever it is that you're calling forth is coming towards you with just as much energy and intention, right? If you are trying to put the candle out, the flame out of the candle, and it won't go out, this means that your spirit guides and your spiritual team are like, do not put this out. Let this work keep going. You still have work to do, and this needs to progress forward. And I've had that happen to me twice. It doesn't happen very often, where I had to put out the candle because I was leaving, or I wanted to put out the candle because it seemed like it was going too crazy, or, you know, maybe there was like a little bit of soot or smoke coming up from it, and I was like, I don't want it to be smoking in my room or my apartment. And then I tried to put it out and it wouldn't go out. That's your spirit team saying, like, it's not meant to go out, baby. Let it do what it needs to be doing, okay? It's not the time to try to stop the train. We already going. Beep, beep, toot, toot, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. And when I say not going out, I mean you're snuffing it. You're trying to put it out. I've even had candles, and this happened to me one time. Like I said, this has only happened to me twice. But one time, I swear to God, I put it out. And I swear to God, there was a little bit of smoke too. That, you know how when you put out the candle, a little bit of smoke comes. I walked away from it, and I came back, and the candle flame was back on. That was the freakiest thing that I'd ever experienced. This is like right at the beginning too. And I believe that it was a self-love working. And I only turned it off because I was going to go to a performance. And I knew I was probably going to stay out a little bit later after the performance. And Spirit was like, no, you're going to need this. And I'm so glad that I left it on, because when I came back, the flame was so high. It was like really, really powerful. It wasn't flickering. It was steady. It wasn't moving left or right. There was no actions. It was just a steady, powerful, and strong flame. Also, paying attention to the direction of the flames is specifically great for glass candles when you're trying to read the flame, and if it's turning in left or right, especially when it's encased in the glass, there really wouldn't be any wind that would be able to come through. I mean, you've probably burnt a encased 7-day candle or even a votive or whatever the case may be. Once it gets down to a certain point, there's not really a lot of wind that can kind of come in and negatively impact it, especially when it's in the middle or the center or even at the bottom of the candle. But if you see if it's kind of like bending in one direction, these all have different indications, and I'm going to walk you through that. So the east side or the right side, again, you want to make sure that if this is the glass candle, that you have set it up so that there is a front, there is a back, there is a bottom, a top, a left, and a right, and that you know what that is before you light the candle, and that you're not sitting around turning the candle around or whatever case may be, because then how you're going to fucking know what it is that you did. Like, leave it where it needs to be. I always like to put little indications, so I'll put herbs around it, or I'll put crystals in certain directions so I know, or I'll put roots, depending on whatever the root is that I'm working with, in the front part, the center part. It doesn't have to be in each little corner, but it can just be in that center part, so I know this is the front of the candle. So even if I do decide that I want to turn it, like if I want to turn the tray, not the candle, I know that that point is the front of the candle, that's the bottom part, and I can turn it back to that area. When you're looking at the east side, this talks about verbal or written messages, okay? And even talks about inspired ideas that are kind of coming about as a result of this working. If you're looking at the south, similarly to what we were talking about before, this has to do with passionate action, optimism, energy that's going to help you push forward and make your desires a reality. If it's leaning to the left or the west side, it's going to indicate that your intuition is going to help you finding a greater result, or help you tapping into how to obtain this. Using your intuition is going to be the best way for you to obtain your desire. If you're seeing the candle lean towards the top of the plate or the north side, then you're basically going to know that the intention is going to come slow and steady. Lastly, we're going to talk about capnomancy, which is reading the smoke of the candle's flame. Now, some people actually will just do this working by itself, right? They'll light the candle, they'll set intention, and then they'll blow it out, and then watch what direction the smoke goes into, but also the shapes and the symbols or the images that the smoke makes, as a way to basically be able to understand what they're trying to manifest. It's a divination tool, but it can also be a great way of, if you're putting out your candle because you have to go out, it can be a great way to see, like, okay, this energy is in alignment with what I'm trying to do, right? Or it's going in the right direction, or it's manifesting the way that I want it to. This is a really good way of being able to see that. So again, directionally, I'm not going to be able to go over like all the signs and symbols of the like animals and horses. You can go online and find out what horses mean spiritually, or, you know, you see a skull's face, you can almost guarantee that it means like destruction, death, rebirth, you know, things of that nature. But anyways, the east side or the right side, if it's bending in that direction, talks about using logic, good things arriving in the future. Again, that's being repeated here in the same way, right? If it's going towards the west side, then it means that prayers, meditations, affirmation, and spiritual work is going to help you obtain the best results. So if you're already lighting a candle and you're already doing this work, and this is a candle that you've already done, it means keep activating your intention with your prayers, your positive thinking, meditation to clear away any blockages, to silence the mind, tap in with your spirit guides, your ancestors, your angels to help support you. This is going to be the best route and the best avenue to help you get what it is that you want. If it comes towards the south or comes towards you, it's telling you that using your own energetic passion and creativity is going to help you attract what you want, right? Using your internal spark is going to be the best way to obtain your desire. Now, if it's going away from you, if it's going to the north side, then it means that methodical step-by-step action plan is the best way to go about getting what it is that you want. And it also can talk about shedding any negativity that could get in the way of that. So that can mean toxic habits, toxic people, negative thinking that could get in the way of that. These are basic things that you should be doing anyways when you're doing magic and rituals. But at the same time, if it's something that you know is going to require steps, if there's paperwork, if there's signing this, whatever it takes, especially if you're doing, let's say you're doing a new home spell, right? If you're going to be doing some type of work like that, you know that there is going to be methodical steps that are necessary, and to stay with it, to be dedicated to work towards those goals. And that's going to be the best way, right? It's not going to be just like praying and hoping and trying to convince somebody or whatever the case may be. It's going to make sure that your ducks are in a row so that this thing can come to fruition. I had said earlier that when I see certain things like the scorpion and all the other stuff, that I, go in there and I, burn that and I put my oils on it, but try not to play too much with the candle. Let it burn out the way that it's going to. And I would say at the beginning, you're going to want to just let things happen so that you can see how they're going to manifest. You're also going to want to make sure that you have proper documentation of all of this work. You might see things that is not written out there that I haven't shared with you, and you want to be able to write that down for future reference, right? And it might mean something different for you. And then always remember to come back after it's manifested, after it's shown up. Remember to come back. And you should be checking and flipping through your book of shadows every so often, because sometimes you write things and then you forget about it. It manifested, you moved on to the new spell, whatever the case may be. But if you can go back and look through and be like, how many of these rituals that I did that I've already had experiences with, what was that time? Make sure that you're dating it, that you're putting all that information in there, you know exactly what's going on, so that you can write in there the results of it. Okay, the candle was like this happened. It's going to be harder for you to be able to remember things and details of like the beginning, the middle, and the end of how the candle burned if you're not writing that down in the moment. But if it's important for you to learn and practice candle readings, I would just keep your book of shadows, or keep a little pen and pad or whatever. But it's important to indicate those specific types of things, so that when you go back and write like, okay, this is how it manifested, you can see like, okay, these are some signs. Here are the snags. Here are the issues. Same thing with standalone candles, figure candles, any of that. Same exact thing. You just want to keep that in mind, because, it's, again, like I said, there are people who think that a broken candle, an exploded candle is a positive sign. And depending on the working, it could be. But in my experience, when something shatters and breaks, depending on what kind of ritual it is, it's not usually a positive thing. So I'm not going to necessarily be jumping for joy if I did a working that, was meant to be positive or whatever the case may be, and it just exploded. It's like if I'm trying to do a protection working and then it's exploding every time, like, yeah, I'm not going to think that's positive. I'm not going to be like, oh, this worked out. Like, I'm going to be like, something or someone is really fucking trying to attack me, and I need to gear up. Now, I don't suggest just doing candle workings primarily as a form of protection. I think that it's good to be consistent with that. I think it's a great way of being able to support that. But I do believe that if you are going to really be up and on your protection game, then you need to be covering your tracks in a lot of different areas. You need to be practicing warding. You need to be practicing banishing on a daily or weekly or at least a monthly basis. You need to be doing cleansing and clearing and road opening work on at least a monthly basis. You need to be keeping up with these things, healing work, raising vibrational energy, right? Putting protection powders under your house mat or whatever the case may be, washing your windows and things of that nature with protective washes. You want to make sure you're doing your due diligence in other places, not just lighting a candle, because it's not going to be able to protect against everything. I would even go as far as to say is to start putting sigils behind picture frames and things of that nature. Like if you have a glass picture frame of you and your friends and your family, put like a protection sigil behind the back part of that canvas or behind that photo, as a way to symbolize protection of your family, of you and your loved ones, right? Whatever the case may be. Keep your altar spaces cleansed. There's a lot of other work that can be done to support what it is that you're trying to obtain that don't just require you to burn candles. So don't be foolish in thinking that this is enough. Same with money magic, same with love magic, self-love magic, glamour magic, any other spell. If there's other mundane actions or other types of workings that you can be doing to support the work, do those as well. Don't just light a candle and set it and forget it, because sometimes you will be kind of disappointed in the results or won't hit as hard as it can. So help yourself by being proactive in as many ways as you possibly can to guarantee the success of your workings. All right, you guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Be blessed.
Pull out the candles, pull out the crystals, pull out the recipe.